Man, it is dark and foggy out here on Route 182, Jeff. Can you even see where you're going?
Yeah, sure. Sort of. We just passed a sign for Cherryfield, Maine, and I know we're close, so keep your eyes peeled.
Well, what are we looking for?
We're looking for the headless ghost of Catherine. Hey, legendary listeners, I'm Jeff Belanger.
And I'm Ray Auger, and welcome to episode 44 of the New England Legends podcast. If you give us about 10 minutes, we'll give you something strange to talk about today.
And you can subscribe to our podcast for free on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. And do us a favor, tell others about our show. We're on a mission to document every legend in New England. If more people listen and share their own stories, we can get there.
Yeah, and speaking of sharing your stories, you can also join our super secret Facebook group.
Ooh, you can.
Plus, you can find out more about us and our show at ournewenglandlegends.com. All right, Jeff, it's dark out, it's foggy, and we're driving down Route 182 in Maine in search of a ghost. What happens if we find her?
Well, that might actually be a bad thing.
What do you mean, bad?
You know you've heard over and over that ghosts can't hurt you?
Sure.
Well, this one might. They say if you see her and you don't offer help, you're doomed.
Well, isn't that a fine how do you do?
Well, the story goes that Catherine was a young newlywed woman who was riding along this very stretch of road back in the mid-1800s with her new husband on a dark and foggy night. You know, a night just like this one.
Ooh.
She was wearing a pretty white dress, and just as the horse and carriage nears Fox Pond, something goes wrong. They get in this horrific accident that sends the carriage tumbling. Catherine is decapitated in the crash, and her husband's body, it's never found.
Gone?
Gone. Maybe he was somehow ejected into the pond where he quickly decomposed as fish picked his bones clean.
I think I'm going to be sick.
And now the ghost of Catherine wanders this road, and if you see her and don't stop to offer help, you too may lose control of your car and wind up just like her.
Wow. Well, what happens if you do pick her up?
Well, sometimes you get lucky and she'll just ride along with you for a short while before disappearing in your car. Or, if you're not so lucky, she'll steer you off the road.
Wow.
For other motorists, her headless body materializes in the back seat as they glance in the mirror.
Okay, wait a minute. This is starting to sound like every phantom hitchhiker story I've ever heard and Hollywood has filmed. I think we need to pick this one apart a little bit.
I agree. But there may be more to this than just a story. I've dug up a few headlines that may just shock you. But first, let's go back to the beginning.
That's a good place to start. Today, Route 182 is a 23-mile-long road that connects Route 1 in Hancock, Maine, to Route 1 in Cherryfield.
Right. It's kind of like this more direct and less traveled route rather than following Route 1 down along the coast through busy towns.
Right, exactly. This road is also known as Blackwoods Road because the forest around here is dark and foreboding.
That it is.
That's been its name since before it had a route number. Plus, before that, this was a carriage road in the 19th century. And before that, it was a Native American trail.
So basically, people have been traveling along this route for centuries. And it's a pretty road, and a quiet one. The trees arc over to form a tunnel of foliage in places, and even today you can hardly get a cell signal in various spots along the road.
Yeah, I can't get any right here. So this story of Catherine's ghost has been passed around since at least a century and a half. But there's one crucial piece to the story we just can't find.
What's that?
Any record of a woman dying or being decapitated on this road back then. So we asked for help.
My name is Marcus Librizzi. I'm an author of 5 books, and I'm a professor of English at the University of Maine in Machias.
Now, in his book, Dark Woods, Chill Water, Ghost Tales from Down East Maine, Librizzi chronicles the story of Catherine's ghost.
Marcus chronicled various sightings of Catherine's ghost, and he even had his own strange encounter up there. What happens when you write a book is that you work to collect these stories, but then, after it's published, more people tend to come forward and share their accounts.
So we asked Marcus for an example of a modern sighting of Catherine.
The prototypical sighting example that people would have would be seeing a young woman, attractive, brunette, in a long white gown, walking, seeming a little dazed, or it could just be that she was dressed inappropriately, like you see her in the middle of the winter, and she's just wearing this long white dress. And although the most lurid legends have the spirit being headless, everyone that I've interviewed that have seen the figure have seen her with her head, and they usually mistake her for a young woman that seems lost, dazed, in need of help. And then only later do they realize that she's not flesh and blood.
Now, Jeff, for me, this is one of the most intriguing parts of this haunting. When you have multiple people over time describing pretty much the same thing, you start to think this must be more than just a story.
But let me just add an amendment to this prototypical sighting, because when I was doing the research and writing the book, that was the baseline. That's what most people were seeing and reporting, and that's what most of the stories revolved around. But then I began to realize that electromagnetic disturbances on that mountain are probably way more frequent than the sightings of an actual apparition that are there as well. So there's something about that area that has a high incidence of electromagnetic disturbances.
So, for example, there's not very good cell reception, if any, around Catherine's Hill.
Yeah, but that's not exactly shocking considering it's a remote part of the state.
Totally fair, and that's true. But now we're getting into some really nerdy ghost hunting stuff right here. Electromagnetic disturbances in and around a haunting, it's an idea that goes back over a century to the great Harry Price in England, who was looking for electrostatic discharges in haunted places. Sometimes electronics go wonky in places that are said to be haunted, causing us to ask why.
Now, this is when something weird happens to Marcus on Catherine's Hill.
This was in the late 1990s, maybe 1999, perhaps even 2000. It was in July, late afternoon, and I was traveling east I was driving in a brand new minivan. I had 3 little kids in their car seats. I had 2 dogs in the car. It was a very hot afternoon, I remember, as I was driving. And it was important that I was going east, because if you're going the other way, you go up the steepest part of the hill, and that's when you really have to downshift. So there was really no real downshifting with the car, and I had no mechanical difficulties with this car whatsoever. I was probably traveling at 35, maybe 40 miles an hour, and just as I crested where the Catherine's Hill area is, where the ghost is most frequently seen, everything in the car just stopped. This has never happened to me. Of course, I've been in a car that's stalled before, but I've never been in a car that is stalled while I've been driving almost 40 miles an hour. So it was a really strange experience, and I got everything was like frozen up in the car, and I just managed to brake and coast off to the side of the road right on the crest of that hill as well. And there was no cell phones back then. Even if it was now and there were cell phones, there would have been no service there. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I've got these 3 kids. I've got these 2 dogs. It's too hot to leave the animals in the car. I'm like, how am I going to handle this? And then I just calmed down for a second, turned on the car again, and it was perfectly fine. This has never happened again or since.
Now, our mechanic friends might hear this story and say, I know what can cause that.
The alternator.
Exactly. I've been on the highway myself when my alternator went and the car shut down. But I got a few warnings for a few minutes before that. Like lights on the dashboard started flashing and doing weird things. The radio shut down. Yeah. The car puttered, and I knew I better get off the road right away.
Well, that does sound like the alternator.
Right. But when your alternator dies like it did for me, it's dead. You don't pull over and start the car again.
Yeah.
And my car was old at that point, not new like Marcus's. His car started just fine, and he went on his way. Professor Librizzi will be the first to tell you that this is not proof of the paranormal on Catherine's Hill. It's just something you can't explain.
But when he combines his experience with many others that he's documented where they too had electric car trouble.
Exactly. It gets more interesting. He said some people told him stories of driving along that road and picking up radio broadcasts from decades ago.
Well, man, that's some Twilight Zone stuff right there. But we still have the mystery of the original accident. And who was Catherine?
Okay, our best guess is that Catherine's Hill was named for Catherine Downing, who died December 29th, 1862. She's buried just up the road in nearby Cherryfield, Maine. But there's no record of this Catherine dying in any tragic way. So it could be that we're naming a ghost after the nearby hill, which was named for a woman who once lived here and is now buried nearby. Or maybe the ghost of Catherine has been around so long, they named the hill after the ghost.
It is curious that according to Professor Librizzi, this legend shows up in mid to late 19th century, which is about the right time for Catherine Downing. But she didn't die in any tragic way, right? As far as we know.
That's right, and we can't find any other old record of a tragic accident like that here from a century ago.
And yet these sightings, they persist.
Not only that, the origin story has changed over time.
Okay, what do you mean?
If you ask some people today why the road is haunted, they'll tell you a modernized version, like it was back in the 1950s or so, and Catherine was riding down this road with her boyfriend when they lost control of the car. She was decapitated, and he was never found.
Well, why do you think a story like this changes so much?
Well, it happens because people want to relate to the story. A horse and buggy can be too far back in time for some people. So the story's retold in a car to make it more accessible and retellable.
And the story is still hanging around, which means people must still be seeing this apparition of Catherine.
I agree, and Professor Librizzi still hears from those people. But here's another reason this legend is still hanging around. And this one is shocking and can't be disputed.
Okay, what do you mean?
Okay, read this headline from the January 18th, 2013 Bangor Daily News.
Yeah, this is recent. It says, man killed in Route 182 accident. State police say a local man died Friday morning when a vehicle he was driving on Route 182 struck a guardrail, became airborne, and went down a steep roadside embankment. Whoa. But accidents do happen, right?
Yeah, they do. But this road has had dozens of accidents over the last few decades, and more than one fatality.
So you're suggesting that the ghost of Catherine has something to do with all these accidents?
Well, here's the thing, Ray. We can't say either way if those fatalities involve motorists not offering help to a weary specter. But I will say this. A lot of people head up this road looking for ghosts.
You mean like people like us, right? Right?
Yeah. So you drive up here scanning the sides of the road on a dark and foggy night looking for the ghost of Catherine. Maybe you're not paying attention to driving, and then...
And then you become a permanent part of the legend.
People hear how dangerous and haunted this road is, and maybe they take a little more caution when driving through.
Yeah, this stuff really gives me the chills, Jeff.
Well, do you have a story to share out there? A question for us, a comment? Call or text our legend line anytime at 617-444-9683.
We've been getting a bunch of texts this week, and it just gets more and more every week, which is exciting.
It does. It's great.
All right, check this one out. This one comes from country code 447754. That's Coventry, England. So this text must have cost you a few pence to send out of the country. It says, New England legends are just the right amount of creepy and intriguing to ensnare my senses and get my mind working. Thanks. Hey, you're welcome.
Yeah, cheers.
Thanks for listening in Old England.
Right on, Old England. Thank you, guys. We also got this one from the 401 area code. That, of course, is Rhode Island. It says, one of my favorite legends is the story of Nellie Vaughn of West Greenwich Baptist Church and Cemetery. Very spooky stuff. So Nellie Vaughn is a great story, and I'm sure one we'll get to. And I might have to call my buddy Andrew Lake on that one. He's an author and researcher. Great resource. So stay tuned.
Nice. Now listen, if you like what we're doing here, please consider becoming a patron at our Patreon page. Go to patreon.com/New England Legends. For as little as $3 a month, you can get early access to new episodes, access bonus episodes no one else gets to hear, and become a part of a community that's on a mission to document every legend in New England.
Until next time, remember, the bizarre is closer than you think.